work doing everything digitally.
Yeah.
But they've been working out all right. Not too bad.
Yeah, my classes haven't been too rough, the start of it anyways.
Have you had, are your professors using Zoom?
They are starting next week. My anatomy professor wants to do like lectures, so I think that's how we're gonna do that. But all my other classes, like my English class was already online, so it was funny. She was like, well, we don't really have anything to change, so just keep on doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I've had a couple students who are like clinical lab science majors, and all of their classes are already online. So nothing's changed for them.
Yeah, makes it easy.
All right, give everybody a couple more minutes. You have about half the amount of people. Also, as a side note, if you guys are, every time I log in, I switch my view from speaker view to gallery view. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see something that says speaker view or gallery view, and you can click on that. It's just easier, I think, to see everybody who's involved, and also your faces aren't like popping on and off the screen depending on who's talking.
This makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
I don't have a camera.
Well, that's an F. F for the day. I can't see your face. That's done. I actually heard that professors were doing that. If you couldn't put a camera on, they wouldn't be able to tell if you were there, I guess, or not. And they I don't know what they were doing to hold kids accountable to that. I mean, I don't know how you do
This is
that.
just a pre-recording of me.
Yeah, just answering questions. It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? Where they open up the door and all of a sudden a tape plays. That's really dating me, I guess, back in the 80s.
Yeah, I watched that too.
Great movie. Classic.
Yes, I agree.
Probably going to make a remake here within the next 5-6 years. And then everybody will know that as the original. All right, give everybody a couple more minutes. We're missing, we have 40 people registered, but I don't know if we have some dual registrations.
I mean, I guess I could set up my laptop.
I wouldn't want to put you out, Jared.
I don't know where it is right now. Oh, it's in my backpack.
Oh my God! It's probably like on the other side of the room, and it's just too much work to get.
It's literally the other side of the office.
Oh,
yes.
God, so it's like hard to like get out of your bed and walk over there. It's amazing to see like students now, and this is what I said last night in class. Was let's see, in this class we have 43. No, 41. So we're missing.
I'll set it up.
Oh, he's gonna do it now. He's felt bad. Now he's felt bad. But last night, everybody who's in bed, like watching the lecture or participating in the class, I said there's zero effort now. So all of your effort, your brain power, everything that you have available is just being used on learning. And it's so much more effective when you're able to just lay in bed and participate in class.
I would much rather this.
Yeah, you learn so much more when you could just like sort of wake up and just be in class. You know?
Yeah, because a lot of people were like complaining, I guess, saying that like I didn't sign up for online classes. Like I totally get that. Like we didn't, but I mean, I think this is nicer. Like,
well, there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing we could do about that.
Yeah.
Like none of the classes, and to be honest with you, it's probably more difficult for a lot of the professors than it is the students, because the professors are having to make that transition. And a lot of the older ones that I've had experience with too, have a hard time doing that. you know?
Mhm. Yeah, my anatomy class, it's definitely very hard to put it online, especially with like all the labs and stuff like that. It
Yeah.
actually kind of made it a little easier, not gonna lie, with like because our labs, they got put online, so now it's easier to get, because we just have to like submit a lab book,
Uh-huh.
but for our test, it's monitored and it's lockdown browsers, so.
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting. All right, guys, we're gonna get started. And more people will probably be showing up, and we'll just pop them in. But this is no, we had a Kahoot, but this is going to be the first true class that we hold over Zoom. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody's not going stir crazy, locked up inside your houses, wherever you are. How many of you are still in Fort Myers or South Florida? That
Me.
don't live here. I actually had a few students that couldn't go back home because their cities were quarantined where they were.
Oh, wow.
You know, so I was like, man, that's crazy. So they're just hanging out here. Really, Megan can't go back to New Jersey? That's wow. Yeah, I heard it was pretty bad there, but yeah, it's an interesting time for everything right now to see how everything's affected by this. You know, it's interesting too if you guys invest in the stock market, how you'll notice if something like this happens, the stock market drops substantially, but there's somebody making money, right? And Zoom, actually, what we're using right now is a publicly traded company, and their stock's through the roof, right? Same thing with Amazon and a few other companies that, you know, everybody's sitting at home, nobody can work, so they're buying stuff and having it delivered right to their house. So Luke asked a question: if you guys can, I don't know if you have it pulled up, but you can pull up a chat, and there's a group chat that you can participate in. But Luke just asked if summer classes will be online. And as of right now, we don't know. Personally, I don't foresee that happening. I hope it doesn't happen. Because that'll create a lot of, just wreak a lot of havoc, you know? But we don't know, right? Everything is pretty fluid right now. And the president keeps emailing as much as he can, but if you read those emails, you'll see too that he's still unsure as to what is actually happening, because this is all, like, right now there's 1,200 cases in the state of Florida. That's 0.005% of the population, and the entire state is shut down. So if something happens where more people contracted, I don't know what's going to take place, you know, because this is pretty extreme right now for the situation, I think. But that's just my opinion. I don't know. But what do I turn on in order to hear? So if you look down, you can't hear anything. Maria?
Should be the bottom.
Well, obviously she can't hear me. If she can't hear me, she's not going to be able to type back. That might just be the software on her computer. You shouldn't have to turn on. You shouldn't have to turn on anything to hear, unless your computer.
The bottom left, there's an arrow, pop-up arrow that gives options on speakers and audio settings.
Yeah, that's what we typically do.
Also, they should implement like a raising your hand emote or something like that.
So they do.
Oh yeah.
So if you go down to more, there should be a way for you to ask a question or raise your hand.
More.
So I don't see it. I have reactions, but it's just a thumbs up and hands clapping.
Yeah, that's what I have.
If like if I go into breakout rooms, if I separate you guys into breakout rooms, there's a way for you to ask a question and let me know that you need help.
Oh, I found it right here. It's under participants, and it says raise hand.
Okay, there you go. I don't see any of that on mine, so that's what you would do. There you go.
Cool.
So then I see the little icon, and I can call on you or something. All right. So that's the way this is going to be handled for the remainder of the semester. We're going to be online, and this is one of the only classes that I wish we could have in person, because it's more focused on lecture and content, and I like having conversations in person with you guys about it. So as we make our way through the lecture portion, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask questions and talk. I'm going to ask questions, so please interact. And the meeting password, you shouldn't need that. Let me pull it up. Hold on. Just give me 1 sec, guys. So that's how we're going to handle it. Your assignment 6, I pulled down, and I appreciate it, Megan, for you bringing that to my attention. It was an observational exercise that involved you going out and observing students in the natural habitat of the outside of the classroom, and how they interact with each other, what they're doing. But obviously we can't do that. So that assignment's been pulled down. So just focus on assignment 7 and the other ones moving forward. We're in the last module of the semester, and it's focused more on the entrepreneur, right? And how an entrepreneur decides to launch his or her company, right? So this. I will preface this by saying, if you do see a cat or two walk by the screen, I apologize, because there's a few of them in here and they like to bother me while I'm doing meetings. All right, so let me do this. We will screen share. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is ethnographic research, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. Like we said, we're now going to be in the part of this class that focuses on what an entrepreneur has to do to get his or her business off the ground, okay? So far, this is what we've focused on, right? Identifying opportunities, how to exploit the opportunity, what resources do we need to acquire to help get this off the ground? What resources do we have already at our disposal, right? We've talked a lot about that through the principles of effectuation, right? Bird in hand. What do we have available to us now that we can leverage to help get a business off the ground? What we're going to focus on next is entrepreneurial strategy, organizing, and mainly the entrepreneurial strategy, and how does it organize into an actual business, right? So effectuation, right? Opportunities are created through action. You begin with your means. This is what we're talked about with bird in hand, right? What skills do you have available to you? What skills are you good at? What do you do well? And how can you leverage those to create solutions to problems that you identify, right? If you guys remember, affordable loss was how much you're willing to lose when it comes to, or how much you can lose when it comes to getting your business up and off the ground. Crazy quilt was getting commitments from other people. This is not just leveraging your skill set, but now your social network. So what people could you use to help you get your business up and off the ground? And then leveraging surprise, because this is something that all entrepreneurs do well, right? When you throw a curveball or something along those lines, you can either strike out or you can do your best to adjust. And the good entrepreneurs are the ones who adjust. And now as we understand that, right, we're going to take the next step is to understand action, right? So the first step entrepreneurs can take is to learn more about the stakeholders for whom they want to create value, right? What is the opportunity? This is where we mentor our students and point them in the direction of going out and observing, right? Just like your assignment was asking you to do. We ask them to drop surveys into groups, talk to people, and really begin to understand the group of individuals that they're targeting as their primary audience, right? And this is the only way to really do it. I mean, we were taught when I was in business school that you build a product first under the assumption that you basically think that people are going to buy it, and then you find a target audience who's willing to buy it. And that is capital intensive, time intensive, labor intensive, and you don't know if there's an actual market that actually exists, right? So the first thing we do is identify the opportunity and begin to understand the perspective of our target audience, okay? And if anybody has questions, just let me know. All right, so we put this up in one of the previous classes in the last module, and we talked about theories, right? And how the process of creating theories and testing theories follows the same process as we follow in entrepreneurship, right? The first thing we do is observe, right? Most of us will carry some sort of journal with us and just take notes on how people interact. A good example of this is when we were, and I think I've used this before in class and explained it to you, when Taste of Immokalee was getting started, students didn't just assume that these are the reasons why people buy salsa. They went to Publix's and watched people walk down the aisle and make a choice on what salsa they bought, and then ask them, why'd you choose that, right? This observation and questioning, line of questioning, is super effective to understand why people are doing what they're doing, right? Not just making assumptions or trying to provide a product. You can create a salsa, throw it on a shelf, and hope people buy it. But the real reasons why people make decisions, just like we talked about with rational actors, if you guys remember that, people being rational. The real reason why people make decisions are what is going to help you define how you provide them a solution, right? So you write down what you observe, you detail the opportunity. Our focus today is going to be on research, which is one of the most important components. And then after that, we create an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. We offer it up, let people try it out and test it. And then we determine if it works, right? If it fits. We get their feedback, we modify the business model, and then we eventually pitch to resource providers, which means investors, runway program, participants, all these different options that we have, right? Any questions so far? Nothing? All right, I'm gonna try and be as interactive as possible with the content so we can at least have some conversations and keep you guys from falling asleep in your beds, where I know a lot of you are probably laying right now.
Sorry, I'm trying to set up my laptop still.
Oh, you're good. All right, so research is, I don't know if any of you are like this, but when you find something that you love, regardless of whether you're trying to start a business involving it or not, you just read and research and learn as much as you can about it because it's something you're genuinely interested in, right? This plays into the idea and the sort of theory, I guess, of entrepreneurs being successful if they pursue a passion, right? Because if you remember from previous lectures, if you pursue something that you're genuinely passionate about, you retain that information more readily. and you are more active in terms of acquiring that information, right? So research is absolutely key. And there's a ton of different ways we can do this. I'll show you one real quick because it's really helpful. Yeah. Let me jump here. You all have access to as students at FGCU, and it's huge, right? I may have talked about this in the past, but it's called IBIS World. So if you go to the databases of FGCU and you click on, click here, right? FGCU Library A to Z databases, right? Choose I, and you go to IBIS World. You have to first log in, right? But once you're in, you can type in any industry you're looking to research. Just give it a second. And it'll give you the industry data along with predictions on where experts think the industry is going. So if we want to look up coffee and snack shops, so this is the industry data for coffee and snack shops, right? This is just an overview. If we go to industry at a glance, this will tell you that it's a $50.7 billion industry. It's growing annually at about 5% a year. It's expected to continue to grow. The profit margins are up. The wages as a share of revenue are up. And here are the trends. Here are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's called the SWOT analysis of the industry. And you can go through all of this and see like who the major companies are. Obviously, Starbucks has a near quarter of the market. And it gives you all the information on them, coffee and bagel brands, Dunkin' Donuts, right? So you can go and find all this information about industries you're interested in getting involved in with your company. And it helps to at least give you an idea. So in the creativity class, if you guys make the transition to creativity, we use IBIS World quite a bit for your final presentation, your feasibility report, all this stuff, because it helps to really validate you validate your market as one that's large enough for you to operate in. But it's a really cool resource. All right. So ethnographic research is the same as what we call customer discovery, right? We're focusing on people's behavior, and we're doing research to understand if the group of people that we identify as our target market are actually our target market, right? We do this quite a bit. And as entrepreneurs, we tend to make assumptions, right? Like this group of people is definitely going to buy my product without going out and talking to them. And unfortunately, we end up in the same position as the Segway guy, as Google Glass, right? We are as Magic Leap. I don't know if any of you have ever heard or seen of Magic. Has anybody heard of Magic Leap? No? So let's see if this will get up there. So this is Magic Leap, and it's an augmented reality headset, right, that you wear. And I don't know how many people would feel comfortable walking around with this, but it allows the computer that you're basically wearing on your hip that's connected to your headset augment your surroundings, right? So it'll overlay images and text and things like that and make your physical surroundings interactive, which is pretty crazy. But they were working on this for 5 years. So this is what, I mean, I don't know the purpose of this, but you can see fish in your living room. But and a little spaceman on your table. Okay, we're getting some more people in. But you're wearing the headset and you're able to see all these things in your within your space. Magic Leap was being developed for years and years and years, and it never launched. It never tested. Their CEO was super effective at selling, right? Selling this idea, and he got investments, I think, from. Let's check. Having the computer right here is really fantastic. There we go. He raised, they won't tell you, $2.6 billion, right? From Alibaba, from Google, right? All these really significant companies bought into this. And it turned out that it's interesting, right? But I don't know how many people are actually able to purchase something for thousands and thousands of dollars. Microsoft had already come out with the HoloLens, which does the same thing. But it's one of those things where they thought they had a market. They thought people were going to purchase it. They raised billions of dollars, and it basically fell flat. You have to carry this computer on your side while you wear this headset. So this is what it looks like. And I don't know. Yeah, it's supposed to be sort of like virtual reality, except you, like Google Glass, it overlays images on your current surroundings. So if you put it on, you would still be able to see everything and move around everywhere, but then you would see images on top of all of that. How many of you would wear this and like walk around?
Maybe it was just the glasses.
Right? Like this was interesting because Glass is now a spin-off of Google, and this is what theirs look like, right? So it was a little bit less obtrusive. Yeah, not with a laptop. No, like, I don't know. It's a very strange thing because how they were able to sell that many people, just like the Segway. And they put out something that looks no different than virtual reality headsets to a certain extent. So the Glass Enterprise Edition looks more like this. So it looks a little bit more like glasses, right? Than the Magic Leap, right? So this is what it looks like. And these are the options that you can choose. And they're pretty cool. Or maybe you might even be able to retrofit. I don't think so. But so that's what they're hoping, is that it becomes a new popular thing, right? The expectation of that is that it becomes a new popular thing. But unfortunately, you can't really like predict that, right? Because like what we're talking about is the same as making the assumption. Remember, like with the pet rock and with the vest that the hamsters or gerbils or whatever could run around in, right? People built those before they talked to customers. And it's hard because in these situations, if I went out to you guys and I said, what if I could build you a headset that would completely change the way you interacted with things? You'd be able to change you'd be walking through an IKEA and look at a furniture set and be able to change the color of the furniture to see what it would look like in your house, right? You'd be like, man, that's cool. And then you would move on. I would develop that based on my research and give it to you. And you'd be like, what the heck is this thing? I have to wear a headset in order to do this? This is nuts. Put a computer on my side. It's not very practical, right? So this is where research and asking the right questions and focusing on as many people as you can is important, because the information you get may be effective, but it's not necessarily pertinent to what you're trying to develop, right? And it could be falsely misleading, right? In everyone telling you, yeah, this is a great idea, but unfortunately, yeah, IKEA does have a similar feature. Amazon too. So if you take a picture, or if you pull up your phone and you're looking to buy furniture on Amazon, you can go into their augmented reality feature and place that piece of furniture in your room somewhere and see what that chair or that couch or that auto whatever will look like in your space. So they're doing it. It's just not a headset that's constantly being accessed. The other one that's really strange too is, I don't know if you guys have ever used this, but like Snapchat spectacles. This is crazy, right? Has anybody ever done this? Or used them or seen them? I think it's just, I don't think they augment reality. I think it's, and these are just filters, right? So I think it has more to do with you just taking videos of your everyday interactions, right? But it's just kind of crazy. You could buy them for $380. They're just little cameras. My goodness, what people will buy. Does anybody know anybody that has these? What did she do with them, Delaney? Does she use them? They just take video. Yeah. Jared, you raised your hand before?
Oh yeah, it was just to see if you knew about the Amazon feature, but you mentioned it.
Oh yeah, the Amazon feature I found out a couple years. They've had that for a while, and I didn't know about it until a friend of mine showed it to me, and I was floored. It's such a functional thing to have. But that's why customer discovery and this research is so important, because you need to really understand your customer's perspective, right? What they tell you they like may not result in buying behavior, right? So you might, like Evan Spiegel at Snapchat runs all these surveys, does all this research, figures out if all of his customers would like something like this, and all of a sudden puts out these glasses that you can wear and just take video of your life, I suppose, which is sort of, at least to me, it's kind of crazy, right? That people just see like everything. I don't think what I do is that interesting, to be honest with you, but I mean, like that's what the world is doing, right? So, and they're obviously not a huge hit. So the research, right? People might say, oh yeah, that's cool, I would love that. And then they come out and either the price point's too high or they don't like the way they look. Most of the time, I gotta be honest, it's more along the lines of like, I don't like the way this looks, right? You're wearing these weird looking glasses and it's evident that you're taking videos of everything that's going on, right? And people may not like that, right? So the whole purpose of a startup, right? And this is the sort of opposite of what we just looked at. It's about finding customers, willing customers that are willing to pay, right? It's not about building products. The products come second. You go out, you talk to your customers, and you find out what they're looking for, what they currently use to solve the problem, and you make something that's better. Not completely radically different, but incrementally better. Yeah, the YouTubers might use it. I don't know. But it just hasn't caught on. And it's not like it just launched a couple weeks ago. It's something that it's something that's been around now for a few years. And it just hasn't taken off, right? Because it's not exactly the coolest thing in the world to be walking around with like these things on, right? And I think that's an underestimated part of all this, is the coolness factor of things. All right, so you need to understand who your customers are, what their problem is, how they're currently solving this. Remember, we call this the lean launch method, and it's incredibly important in order for you to launch your business successfully, right? Identify who your customers are. First, identify what the big problem is, right? The problem that might be unsolvable, right? For instance, it might be like cleaning up the oceans, right? Or the oceans are polluted, right? Who are your customers? Your customers might be fishermen along the coast of Southwest Florida. How they're currently solving this problem is they might be going out in the mornings and picking up trash, or trying to fish in areas that aren't polluted and all this other stuff, right? How do they currently solve the problem? That's how they currently solve the problem. And what about those solutions work, and what about those solutions don't work? And that's where we start finding problems, right? We find problems with the solutions that they're currently using, our target audience. And those are the problems we solve. They're much more attainable. They're more easily solved. And they create products, right? We create products or services or other solutions that are just a little bit better and a little bit different than what people are currently using, right? Learning curves are a huge barrier when you're starting a company, right? If I'm looking at this and I have to put on glasses now, where there's no reference point, right? It's not like going from a keyboarded cell phone to a smartphone, right? The keyboard's digital, it's a little weird, but I could still use it, it's okay, right? Now I'm putting on glasses and interacting with my world in a completely different way where there's no reference point. So it's a radical new product, and unfortunately, those typically don't work, right? All right, so this is how we were taught, right? The first thing you do is come up with an idea, and this is how a lot of us, especially in college, right? Actually, no, not just in college, but I say in college because most of my students come up to me and start with this. The first thing everybody does is come up with an idea without ever really understanding that the only way they came up with that idea is because they experienced a problem in some capacity beforehand, right? So you need to understand the problem or the opportunity first, then you come up with an idea, and then you build it, you brand it, and then you're like, oh wow, now I need to find customers, right? Who's gonna buy this? And it's an assumption that the world needs your product or the world needs X, right? And we have this idea that as long as people see it, they'll want to buy it because it's the best. And our parents and grandparents told us how awesome we are and how awesome this new product or service is, right? But unfortunately, that's not the way it works, right? And the other one that we tend to focus on pretty heavily is the fact that if it solves my problem, it has to have a market. So you're not necessarily representative of the entire demographic of people like you, right? You might have a problem, but first we have to understand if other people have that too. So we don't use this. The first thing we do is identify a problem. That's this idea stage, right? And then we go out and we find our customers. We talk to them and we understand if the group of people we think is going to be our target audience is actually our target audience. And we make a decision. If they're not, do we change our target audience to people who will buy our product? Or do we listen to the current audience we identified and we build a problem for, or build a solution for them, right? But you have to build something customers want, because the market is indifferent to your feelings, right? It doesn't care, nor does it want to hurt you, right? It's just completely indifferent. We as a market will purchase what is more than likely cheapest or adds the most value, right? So we'll purchase what adds the most value, regardless of who's making it. So you need to find customers, ask them what they want, and then we build. We build what they're looking for, and then we brand it, right? We continue working with our customers and eventually make our way back to the idea stage. And this becomes a loop, right? And you need to continue in this loop if you're going to stay in business, because somebody will eventually provide your audience with what they're looking for if you don't. You guys follow? Does that make sense? Yeah. No.
What if the customers don't know what they want?
That's
isn't
brilliant.
that the case sometimes?
Yeah. How do you make people want what they need, right? So how do you like look at what's happening now, right? People, these spring breakers, still tearing it up down in South Beach because if I get Corona, I get Corona, right? That's the perspective of these young people. So how do you make them want what they need, right? It's a hard position to be in. Maybe the customers change, right? If you're, say, there's a difference between trying to do something that was going to make a positive impact and then trying to create a business, right? So if you identify a group of people and they're like, no, man, I'm not going to do this. I don't care about this. They're honestly telling you that they don't care about it, you know? And although it might be a great idea and it might be something they need, it may at this time not be a feasible business, right? So it's tough. That's one of the tough ones. I've seen people make food trucks. I've seen people start mechanic businesses, car shops. We've seen people start music companies, all this kind of stuff. But there's really, I'll give you an example. Emily, one of my mentees, was in an accident and she was hit by a distracted driver, right? And because of that experience, she's worked very hard to build a virtual reality program that she wants to incorporate into schools' driver's ed curriculums that teaches distracted driving, the effects of distracted driving, right? That's a social cause. And she's having more of a challenge for something that on face value, we all would think, yes, that's necessary, than Tyler is selling his barbecue, right? So you have to be able to understand what you're up against when you're trying to impact change at that level, right? There's going to be many more challenges that exist as opposed to selling food or starting a car shop where it's just you sort of operating and you just need a few clients to make ends meet, right? So that's a good question, Jared. It's unfortunate in a lot of situations, but I mean, like, what do you guys think? What do you think is a necessary product or service that should be available to everybody right now? And anybody can chime in. All you have to do is unmute yourself. Something that you wish you could have, or that you think is necessary.
See, that's the thing. It's hard to think of something that's necessary until someone has to tell you that you need this, you know, like Uber.
Yeah.
Nobody would have thought of that. That was like, nobody knew we needed that, but it's a really important thing now.
So that's
really useful.
Like, that's a really good point that you're making, is at what point, and this is the job of an entrepreneur, right? Travis Kalanick came up with Uber. He was no different than any of us, right? He just saw a need in a market and he saw access to the means to pull it off, and just was like, I don't know, people are paying for taxis and everybody for like the entire length of time in the world have complained about taxis, right? I've never met somebody who was like, oh my God, I love getting into taxis, right? He's like, why doesn't somebody do something about it? Like, what if we just drove people around, right? What if I got into my nice car that's like I keep up nice and it's waxed and the floors are vacuumed and I pick somebody up and drive them from point A to point B, right? Would people do it? It's a very easy thing to test too, right? You could just pick up your friends and drive them and tell them to give you a couple bucks and see if it's worth it for them, you know? Like Uber is a great example because we tend to look at these companies where these, you know, Uber's a publicly traded company now and it's huge and everywhere you go, every city you go, Uber is probably the main form of transportation, right? But it started from zero, right? Same thing with Airbnb. The sharing economy is a brand new industry, right? Like that's something that didn't exist like 15 years ago until these companies came up and started doing all of this crazy stuff where now you can stay in a stranger's home or drive in a stranger's car. Like that's weird, right? It was weird for a lot of people, but it took off because it was one of those situations, like you said, Jared, where you didn't know the demand existed, right? The guys that started Airbnb, Joseph Gebbia, and I forget the other guy's name. They were renting. They wanted to see if somebody would rent out their couch during, I think it was a presidential debate in 2008, and somebody did, and the person on the couch woke up the next morning and like this is a really good example of talking to your target audience. And they both sat down with them. They made them breakfast, right? And they sat down with them and were like, what makes you comfortable staying in our, which is probably a weird thing to ask somebody as soon as they wake up, right? That like starts like setting off triggers of like, why did you want to stay in our place? Why did you think this would be safe? You know, the guy was probably freaking out, but that's what they did. And the guy was like, yeah, like I couldn't find a hotel and this was a great option. You said you'd make me breakfast. Breakfast is good. Like I'm cool with it, right? And then from there, they understood that there was a demand, and that's when it took off, right? All of this space, all of these drivers, there's millions of drivers on the road every day, right? Going from point A to point B. Why not throw somebody else in there who's going in the same direction and make a little money, right? So it's just, and the thing to understand is that they all start at zero and they begin to scale as they build their model more effectively and streamline and begin to understand their customers more effectively, right? Like the guys always say, the Chris Sacca from Shark Tank was like, I passed on the guys. I passed on the Airbnb guys because I told them, I was like, I'm gonna make you guys are gonna get in a ton of trouble because somebody's gonna get murdered in one of your Airbnbs and it's gonna be your fault, right? So that was the consensus like throughout the valley on what this business was going to be like, and they eventually proved everybody wrong, right? So there were reservations. Public Wi-Fi is definitely a necessary thing. That would be interesting, right? That would be pretty cool too. And it's funny you say that because here in Bonita, there's a place called Farmer Mike's and it's a U-Pick. So Elena said that something that she would like to have access to with all the grocery stores running out of food, which is super weird. I don't know if I told you this, but the two things at the grocery store, I went to Publix, two things they were out of were potatoes and hot dogs. And I have no idea why those two things were like the hot ticket items. But I did buy the last 7 oranges in Publix, so I felt pretty good about that.
Maybe because they last a long time.
Yeah. And it was just absolutely crazy. The way people were like running around like it was the apocalypse. And they were like, we need to get food. Like somebody was like, excuse me, do you have toilet paper? And the woman that worked there started laughing at her. And I was like, this is crazy. This is insane, right? Yeah, and Kayla's saying, I think Kayla, you work there, right? Do you work at Publix? Yeah. It's absolutely crazy. But that would be interesting if you all had access to community gardens that you could plant and work and you know, like I said, there's a place up in Bonita called Farmer Mike's, and it's a U-pick, so you can actually just pay for a bucket and go out and pick as many strawberries, tomatoes, you know, different fruits and vegetables as you want. But they also have a ton of vegetables and stuff for sale in their little stand area. That's pretty cool. That's the closest thing I can think of to what Lena was talking about. All right. So this is just a quick review, right? Startups are temporary organizations for this reason, right? The more you talk to customers, the more you evolve your business. It doesn't stay in one lane forever. And if it does, it's more than likely going to be, it's going to fail pretty quickly, right? You have to be able to pivot, to adjust, and to evolve your business as quickly as possible, right? And you're looking for this, right? The more you begin to change your business model, the more you're sort of moving down a path of finding a scalable one, right? The more you listen to your customers and evolve to what they're telling you, the more you become a scalable business, right? Because people are now going to be more willing to actually purchase whatever it is that you're selling. All right, so starting the search. So ethnographic research basically just means understanding your customers and immersing yourselves in their everyday lives, right? Reporting, observing life, taking as many points of view as possible. This is applying a lot of the empathy empathy side of things that we try and teach and have you guys experience as much as possible. You can use interviews. We usually do problem interviews and solution interviews, and then you can go out and talk to people as much as you want by evolving them over time. So problem interviews are to first find out if the problem exists. You don't necessarily go out and just say, hey, I'm building this, would you buy it, and for how much? You want to first understand from the customer's perspectives what it is they're experiencing and what they think, right? And then once you have proof that the problem exists in a large market, then you go out and ask them about your solution, right? And then the analysis of data also involves interpreting the subject's actions, right? So you can tell when somebody gets frustrated. You can tell when somebody gets anxious. You can tell when somebody becomes indifferent and wants to walk away, right? So you have to be able to not just interpret those, but also work on manipulating the conversation when you hit a roadblock like that. And you can tell when somebody's sort of like losing patience to move it in a different direction and get them talking a little bit more about what issues they're facing, right? So why this works. It's hard for them to stop and view behavior as an outsider, right? So when you're doing something and you discover that there's a problem that exists for you, it's hard for you to remove yourself and be like, well, you know, like this is why I'm actually having this problem, or this is the actual problem I'm having. It's not really what I first identified, right? And remember what we talked about, right? Humans prefer status quo and often don't recognize that it even exists, right? How many of you do that? In the grocery store, Kayla is a great example. How many of you just go to the grocery store and buy the same food over and over and over and over and over because it's what you're familiar with, right? Yeah. Most people do, right? We get into this status quo and we, oh my God, lots of answers. Very good. Yeah. I mean, do any of you actually go and make an effort to try new things? Like you pick up new things, you try and cook new things, add new ingredients, that kind of stuff. Does anybody?
Rarely.
That was actually one of my New Year's resolutions this year, because I always do the same things, get the same things and everything. And I was like, you know what? This is my year. I'm going to start trying new things.
Good. Yeah. I mean, like to me, that's incredibly important, but I fall into this loop too, where I go, I know I need like X amount of things. So I just go, I know where they are. I pick them up and I leave. Right. My wife is excellent at trying new things. Right. She will go and she will pick up new ingredients. She'll try new products or different versions of products and things like that. But man, I get in that lane and I just hustle through it. And that's another good example too, Sebastian, is I'll talk about a couple things that I saw. One is if you're trying to be a good cook, if you're trying to learn how to cook, you make an effort to go and pick up some interesting things and like impress your boyfriend or girlfriend and be like, look what I just cooked tonight, right? And that might move you to step outside of your comfort zone a little. And Elena said something too that I'm also very guilty of, and that's going to restaurants and eating the same thing, right? I'll pick up the menu. Actually, I won't pick up the menu. I'll go to a place specifically and know exactly what I want as soon as I sit down. And it's terrible because I never try anything else. But I am definitely, I'm definitely guilty of that. But this goes back to what we talked about earlier in the semester with the explore, exploit concept, right? So think of it like this. If you are moving to a new place, right? Are you going to explore the restaurant scene to find the good places, or are you just going to eat at McDonald's because you've eaten there before, right? And then think of it from the opposite perspective. If you're moving out of a place and you've been living there since you were born, right? You know all the good places. Are you going to continue to explore some of the new restaurants, or are you going to go back to your favorites before you move out of town, right? There hits that saturation point where you've felt like you've tried enough and you've decided that now I'm going to exploit my choices and focus more on the stuff that I know I like, right? So as you know, customers or just human beings, we tend to do that, right? That's that status quo that we like to fall into because it saves us time and we default to system one. Our brain, our sort of like subconscious takes over and we just float through it, right? Good. So an example, right? You park your car every day. No, not anymore, but that's the best thing about if I have to go to campus now, I could just go and park I feel like I'm a movie star. I just go and park anywhere I want. All the spots are open. You park your car every day in the garage, but how often do you stand outside and watch people? I mean, it's a little bit weird, but like, what do you think you would find if you stood outside the parking garages, especially the ones that get like super packed, like the one at Luckert? I think that's garage 4. What do you think you'd discover? And this you can answer. You can pull mute off and talk. People getting
rushing,
right? Yeah, you might see people rushing. You see people getting into accidents, or maybe getting close to getting into accidents. Like, I'm surprised, like, there aren't accidents every 15 minutes in that garage, right? I've seen near misses. I see near misses on a daily basis. People almost getting hit. It's crazy. This is how you guys think of the car stalking people to get their spot. This is a really negative perception of the parking garages on campus, guys. Corners are dangerous, equal dangerous.
trying not to get hit on the way to the stairs or the entrance.
Now your head has to be on a swivel, right?
Yeah.
So like you watch people and you understand, like, and I've seen this before where students park, they get out of their car, they're on their phones, they have a textbook that they're reading or something like that, they're getting ready for an exam, and they're on a path, right? It's a complete tear, and they don't see anything that's going on around them, right? They get out of their car and they just run down to the building because it's taken them 25 minutes to find a spot. They're almost late for class, and it's a hectic experience, right? So this is something that, in order for you to actually understand what people are doing or acting like or saying, right? These are different ways to collect data, right? That's all this is. You can actually take pictures or videos of what's happening. You interview people and write down what they're saying, reporting notes, all this kind of stuff, right? And what you're looking for is this term over here called vujade, right? Deja vu is when you feel like something unfamiliar feels like something that has happened before, right? Vujade is the complete opposite. And it's the feeling that the same thing that's happening is viewed in an entirely new way, right? So we do these things sort of out of second nature on a daily basis. And we experience them and don't think twice, right? But it's taking the time to look at them from a different perspective and view them in a new way that allows us to understand the problems and opportunities that exist, and then from there create solutions that people are looking for, right? So nobody would have thought that we needed to have a ride sharing service, right, Jared? That's what you're saying. And then Travis Kalanick looked at it from a completely different perspective, right? He experienced this phenomenon of vujade, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over. How many of you have ever had that happen where you just do the same and finally you're like, what the hell am I doing? There has to be a better way, right? I think we've all had that sort of like that breaking point where we're like, what is going on? Why am I just blindly accepting this as the normal and going along with it, right? You're standing on a street corner in New York trying to flag a taxi and you're just like, what is happening? There's thousands of cars that are passing you, right? Thousands and thousands of cars passing you on the streets of New York, and you're waiting for a yellow one. He was like, what is happening in my life that's making me choose to do this, right? So he was able to look at that problem from a different perspective and understand that there might be some potential there, right? And that's what we're talking about as entrepreneurs. And you need to be able to view these situations from just a different person's, not different person's perspective, but just pull yourself out of it and be objective as much as you can and understand actually what's happening, right? And as you collect this data, so here's an actual picture of parking lot of garage 4, right? And as you collect this data, there'll be some stuff that's usable and some stuff that's not necessarily usable, right? And what we use here as an example is, why don't you need to know everyone's names who parked in a garage to estimate how full the garage will be, right? Think about that. Like the first thing you'll ask somebody is, hello, like what's your name? But is that a relevant piece of data?
No, we just need to know how many cars are in the garage. Nothing.
Right? Like how long do you plan to stay? I think Harvard ran a study that found that the average person drives around a parking lot 9 minutes before they find a spot. In these parking garages, I've definitely driven around for about a half an hour before I finally found a spot, or I've just gone to a different garage and decided to walk. But you need to know different data points are more different data points are more pertinent to your business than others. Knowing people's names is irrelevant. Understanding why they're coming to campus, how long they expect to be on campus, how long, like, when does your class start? It starts in an hour. I have to show up to school. I have to show up to campus an hour early just to hit the parking garages and try and find a spot to make sure I'm on time, right? These are the types of questions and data points that are relevant to you trying to solve this problem, right? And research works because we're able to take a sample size and make assumptions based on that, right? If we're trying to find information about about parking on campus, right, we talk to students. there's 16,000 of them that we have access to. Not so much right now, but when everybody's back on campus, we have access to 16,000 students, and we can talk to 100 or 200 of them and understand and make assumptions that would reflect the viewpoints of the majority, right? And that's why sampling is really important. We had a student that did this. His name was Will Buno, and he created an app called Valet that allowed you as students to sell your spots to other students. So if you were on campus and you were in garage 4, you could say, okay, I'm leaving at 11:30, and somebody who was looking to be on campus at 11:30 could buy your spot. And you would wait for that person to show up, and you would pull out, and they would pull in, right? And I think it's launched now, but I think he had a couple issues with getting things onto campus, right? But or I don't know, licenses, permits, something like that, that he was trying to fight to make sure he could do this. But hey, how many of you would use something like that?
I would.
Like a bid system. So I'm coming to campus, I'll give you $5 for the spot. And he's like, okay. And somebody else comes in and says like 625 or, you know, something, and there starts to, you know, increase before you get to campus. I mean, he found that a lot of students were actually interested in doing that, and he launched it, and he's active right now. Right? So there's a handful of you that are telling me that this would be something that you would use. So good. All right. All right. So when you start to do your research, these are some guidelines, right? The first is use a general template of questions. This could be when the questions that you're trying to answer yourself and questions that you're asking people, right? The most important thing that you can do is get out of the building and talk to people. Talk to your target audience as much as you can. This is one of the most difficult things for your generation to actually experience or do, because most of what you do, most of how you conduct your interactions with other human beings is through social media or some sort of like digital technology, right? You want to start open-ended questions. You really want to stick away from closed-ended questions, but if you do ask yes or no's, always follow up with whys. You want to get into people's heads as much as you can and have them explain in more detail what about their answer or why they're giving their answers, right? The example I use is I had a student who was interested in starting a coffee shop. She went out and talked to people and was asking them, like, do you drink coffee? And people were saying no. And she finally started asking why and realized that it wasn't because they didn't like coffee. It was because that the coffee was too expensive. The taste of the coffee that they had available to them, they didn't like, right? It was too far away, right? So getting it was too time consuming. It didn't mean that they didn't like coffee. They were still potential customers, but there were barriers for them to purchase, right? Or make that decision or make that commitment to buy that she could solve with her service, right? So make sure you always collect as much information as possible. Appreciative inquiry versus deficit-based questions. This has to do with asking a question that's phrased more along the lines of like, I know that this is if you ask somebody like, what current options do you use? You could say like, they'll say like, I like going to Starbucks, right? And you say like, that's great. In a perfect world, how could you make Starbucks better, right? People will tend to answer that more honestly and give you more effective feedback than if you say like, what do you hate about Starbucks, right? If you ask that question, people are gonna be like, nothing, I love Starbucks. They might even get defensive, right? Especially these like brand evangelists that love to, sit at Starbucks all day and drink the burnt coffee, right? And then observe or live a day in their life. So this is important too, going out and actually observing your customers. And then finally, the last thing we're going to talk about is developing empathy, right? So here people are using just objects that they find to understand how people could sleep on an airplane, right? So this is, I think this was conducted by IDEO, the design firm out in California, and they were trying to design more effective sleeping like pods for airlines, for airplanes. And they were trying to understand how people would feel sleeping in these like bunk positions, right? So they were trying to empathize as much as they can by putting themselves in these positions that would make them feel like they were on an airplane, right? How many of you would do this? If you wanted to lay down on an airplane, sleep that confined, would anybody? That's how you had to come back from deployment, Ernesto? Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, that would be a little weird, wouldn't it, to be like sleeping that close to people? But they were trying to design a more effective sleeping situation for airline users. And this is how they were trying to do it, right? Trying to empathize best they can by putting themselves in those positions, right? And this is what's effective in trying to switch perspectives, okay? And that's empathy, right? It's the cornerstone, it's one of the cornerstone pieces of design thinking, which we teach in the design course. And it's just effective for you to implement in everyday life. All right.
Jesus Christ.
Uh-oh. You good, Jared?
Yeah, it's my puppy calling at my door.
What kind of puppy?
It's like a little pit mix rescue dog.
Oh man, bring him on. Show him. I want to see him. Can't talk about a puppy and not show me. All right, guys. We got to hold on a second because we're going to get to see a puppy. Sweet. Oh, yeah. What an adorable little guy.
This is Kane.
Kane.
A little puppy.
How old is he?
Like 6 months.
Oh, he's just a little guy.
Let's say hi.
There you go. You said it.
All right, now
That's
get out.
Awesome.
Get out of here.
Good for you. All right. So, lastly, before we end for the day, we're just going to talk about customer discovery, and this is what we used to use in the value proposition canvas, but the components we keep the same in the lean launch. We're basically looking at customer jobs. What's the person trying to accomplish? So, what are they trying to do with whatever solution that they're using now? The gains, right? So these are the things the customer hopes to get from the solution that they're using, and then the pains. It's sort of where it doesn't match up, right? What problems are they experiencing with the current solution they're using, right? And we do this through the lean launch canvas now, which is a little less convoluted than this process. But all you're doing is just trying to understand what current solutions are being used by customers and what's positive about those solutions and what's negative about those solutions. And we go into more depth in that in the creativity class. All right.
I thought of a good problem that I've had that an app could solve.
Drop it on me.
Well, I used to do like a lot of subcontracting work, and the jobs heavily depend on the tools you have. Sometimes the tools would break. So maybe if there was an app where you could rent somebody's tools who's not using them, in the area. Like for instance, if I was ripping up tile, a chipping hammer, it's not cheap. You can't just go buy chipping hammers when they break or when you don't have one and you only need it for one job. Maybe you can rent it from somebody instead of a tool rental place.
All right. So it's like,
I don't know if that exists, by the way.
So it's like the sharing economy for tools.
Yeah, exactly.
I would look into that. That'd be interesting because a lot of tools are relatively expensive.
Yeah, or like if you're like a homeowner and you just want to do a little project and you only need a tool one time in your life or whatever.
You can rent tools from Home Depot, but they only have a different selection.
Yeah, I know, but like if for me, I live
Selection.
an hour away from Home Depot. What if
Mhm.
my neighbor has the tool I need and I can rent it from him? You know what I mean?
No, I feel you, man. They could call it handy helpers. Oh my God, Mackenzie, you're crushing it.
I'm stealing it. I'm stealing it.
He's stealing it. You're just giving away good names. Stop. But I had a student who thought that it would be awesome if people who had houses and hot tubs could rent out their pools and hot tubs to people who wanted to have pool parties. And he was going to call it Jacuber. Which
Not biting off of anything at all.
I still tell him, because he's down at ETI all the time. He's got a really great company he's working on now. But I'm like, dude, that was one of the I don't know if it was the most insane names, but in concepts that I've ever heard. But I was like, and I can't. That's the problem, is that I can't ever forget it now. Like, every time I see him, I'm like, dude, all I think about when I see you is Jacuber. That's it. All right, so before we head out, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to launch a poll that if you guys can answer real quick. It's just one question, just so I could take attendance that way. That'd be great. So just launch that. If you could just answer that. Please don't answer no.
If we answer no, we're here.
Thanks, Jared. But anybody have any questions before we take off? I'm going to try and update you as much during the week as I can regarding
Live.
like homework and updates with school and stuff like that. So please be aware of that. And if there's nothing else, I think we're good, guys. Have a good day, and I'll see you on Thursday.
Live. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
See you guys.
How do I get out of here?
You're welcome to everybody saying thank you. You're absolutely welcome.
Leave meeting, right?
Yep.